Good morning, everyone. Just wanted to talk to everybody today. We were looking at Sean's RAV, and I'm going to tell you in there is an energy to matter conversion. And you'll have to understand it from the basic beginning of how you make light, how gas works in light, and then how you can compress it. So let's start with something very simple. We're just going to take a DC flyback. We're going to take a battery. We're going to connect it to a ZVS, which is a zero switching, which could basically create a DC pulse, 1, 2, that goes into a ferrite core, that goes into a magnetic field. You have a magnetic field, which is going to be your negative, and then the positive is going to have plastic that goes around that magnetic field with a little strip of copper on each layer. So you're basically making a high voltage capacitor. Therefore, you get the high voltage on the top, which is your positive, and you get the negative, which is your magnetic. Now you've created a magnetodielectric effect. That's pretty simple. That's just a standard DC flyback. That's what it does. Now let's get into something a little bit more we can do with it. When you take the anode and cathode and you put them across from each other, what you're going to get is you're going to get your dielectric that builds out. Now, in that field, the closer that you put the anode to the cathode, you're going to get gas. It's called ozone. It comes out as O3. It is gas. And you're going to get a compression. As soon as you start to put them together, you're going to get a compression. Now, just understand what I just said. I just used high voltage electricity between a magnetodielectric effect in order to create gas. Okay, very important. I created the gas by doing that. The gas was not there before. Now, what am I doing by putting the plates together? I'm creating a Casimir effect. As soon as I put the plates closer together without spark, I start creating compression and a Casimir effect. Now, that's pretty simple so far. This is basic understanding of high voltage. Nothing more. Now I want to convert that to a laser. I want to be able to create the energy in one direction, but I still want to create the same Casimir effect. I take 2 aluminum rods, I place them on my table, I put them at an equal distance apart. I make sure that each one is sprayed with a clear material that does not allow it to spark over. You still put the anode on one and cathode on the other. What happens? The energy itself is compressed within the zone without allowing it to spark over. Therefore, in that Casimir effect, you're creating a gas, but you're also creating a laser. Just understand this. You've just taken your simple little understanding of energy. You've now created gas. You've now put in a Casimir effect. Now you can find it. Now you simply get light. You get light that comes out in a laser. Now you could say, well, we can change that. All we have to do is change the frequency that goes into it and it'll change the light. That's absolutely correct. But in this system, what happens is as you change the frequency, it changes the amount of high voltage and amount of negative or magnetic that you get. So it's on a sliding scale. So as you move it left to right on that sliding scale, you get more of each one. All you're doing is amplifying one to the other in order to change the frequency, in order to change the light color itself. That's very important. Now, you can always add more gas to this, and it'll amplify the effect of what you got going on. That's 100% true. But do you need the gas? No, because you're creating the gas. Just like you created O3, you're going to create other gases. Gases are created by your magnetodielectric effect and how they compress together. Now, that's a basic cylinder when you do it. It's 2 parts that are flat. You make it into a cylinder. Why? Because electricity does not flow like your oscilloscope. Electricity flows in a vortex. It always flows in a vortex. When you understand that, you turn on your light. What does it do? Creates a vortex like this. 360 degrees, it creates an angle and it creates the vortex. What does the vortex do? It gives you light in one direction like this. But in a laser, you compress that. You've compressed the vortex to go like this. That's all you did. You compressed it. So you basically made a cylinder out of it. Now, how do we get from that in order to get to a matter part? Well, when you create this in the lab, as you pull things apart, you're going to get plasma. Just understand this. High voltage will create plasma when you create your light. We can see it. It's just a visible plasma. It is not a tangible plasma yet. You can create it anytime you want. You put the two things across from each other and you can create a plasma in between. It's a visible plasma. It is not a tangible plasma. Now, we want to change this into matter. How do we do that? It's all about confinement. You see, a laser has an open end. It pushes everything to one side. What if we don't want to do that? What if we want to use time as our ally and go from light and gas in order to make plasma? Well, we must confine it in a sphere, not a circle, not a circle on a circle, a sphere itself. Why? Because the sphere itself compresses the amount of energy, it compresses the amount of gas, and it creates a light that comes out of it, and it also produces plasma. Understand this, the longer that it sits in the plasma state, the plasma itself will grow from a plasma that's visible to a plasma that's tangible. It's the same way the sun builds out. It's the same way that Sean was building out his RAVs. You took a high voltage and you converted it by making gas with the high voltage between the magnetodielectric effect in the Casimir effect, which in a sphere, you get a massive Casimir effect because you're confining it. You're not letting it out. You're not allowing it to dissipate anywhere. You are continuously pushing it all into one solid form. When you push it all into one solid form, you convert the gas and electricity and the Casimir effect all into a solid mass. It'll come out as a liquid form, and then it'll go into a solid form. It's funny. I hear Ken talk about it all the time. Water is still steam and it's still ice. But plasma works in the same way. Plasma is still visible light, it's still mass, and it's still gas. It is all in how you build out what you're doing. To build this out, you must use geometry. You cannot use a space-time equation. That is just a way to make a graph so that people can use algebra. You must use geometry. You must use the volume of a sphere itself in order to write the correct math for this. Now, that is a simple way to do it. We converted high voltage, which makes gas, which compressed in a Casimir effect, can create plasma. Once you create plasma, it's very simple to convert it over to matter once you confine it inside of a sphere. Sphere doesn't allow it to go anywhere. And plasma is the exact way to change energy to mass or energy to matter. That's a simple conversion. It's as easy as it possibly gets to understand. You do not need a bunch of million different math formulas to do this. You need the actual formula for the volume of your sphere. Ancient times tried to tell you this. They draw a pyramid, they draw circles above it. In a 2D form, that's exactly what you're going to get. But we're not dealing in 2 dimensions. You cannot build this in 2 dimensions. Why would it look like just a simple waveform? Well, if you took the sphere itself and you cut it in half and you asked me to look at light, it would look like a waveform inside of half of a sphere, because you're only looking at it in 2 dimensions. You're only seeing the waveform like this. You're not seeing the correct vortex that it actually built. That's why. When you start putting things into graph form, you have to understand this. You are not seeing things in the correct dimension they're supposed to be put into because you're using the wrong math. Cannot use algebraic equations in order to define the universe because it's not built in algebra, it's built in geometry. You must therefore use the correct one. All light is excited gas. That's it. Excited gas at a particular duration in time of your voltage between your magneto and dielectric effect. That's all it is. When you measure your speed of light, you're not measuring what it looks like. You're not measuring the gaseous form that you can see. It's you're measuring the amount it's compressed and confined into one straight line. That's what you're doing. You're measuring the energy itself. You're not measuring the light. The light is a gaseous effect. It's an effect. It comes after. You have to build things out before it. It's not a fundamental state. It is a effect. People misunderstand that. They say, oh, it's a photon. If you consider gas at its very smallest point a particle, then that statement may be halfway correct. What do they say in physics? Well, you line them up like peas. And as the peas line up, you create this wave that goes in between the peas. That's what they call it. They say it's the photons building on top of the photons. And they're doing it in a waveform. That doesn't make a damn bit of sense in the real world. Let me just tell you that. It may make sense in some kind of way in your brain when you want to figure it out to write the math, but it makes absolutely zero sense in the real world. Energy doesn't flow like that. Energy flows in vortexes. It flows like this. Energy never flows through the wire. It only flows around the wire. This is a misunderstanding because we're using 2D things to create a 3-dimensional world. It's not working. Space-time is the toilet where I flush my crap. It is not the correct math to build out what you need. You need geometry. Peas in a pod, man. Completely the wrong way to look at it. A photon doesn't exist. It's not in anything that you can think of what it is. If you say gas is a photon, then I guess you could put it in your equation. If you see gas, is what they say, it's mostly indeterminate on what it looks like. That's because it's an effect that builds out from your magnetodielectric effect in high voltage. We see it all the time in the lab. Nobody thinks to put the pieces together on how exactly it's supposed to work. This is a fairly easy equation to figure out. It doesn't take a lot. It's not 10 pages. It's a simple understanding of how voltage works. You have to understand what a sphere does. Everybody starts thinking a sphere. They start drawing little rings on their piece of paper. You immediately converted it over to a 2D image. You have to realize that you did that. You have to consciously understand that you just drew it as a 2D image and you're now trying to define what compression in a sphere would look like in a 2D image. That's wrong. It's always been wrong. You have to understand it in the way that it builds out. A sphere itself confined in gas and high voltage in the Casimir effect because it's a radius, which is geometry, is compressing that sphere 360 degrees around all the way, and it will not let it out. It will not let it out. Because it does not let it out, it takes the light that you see and the plasma that you see and converts it into matter. I could tell you, Lolo, whatever the heck your university name is, I could build it. Matter of fact, I could show you a video right now that does it. Oh man, you don't know who the hell you're talking to, bud. So does centrifugal force play a thing in all of this? Absolutely it does. As you build out things in how they work, it's all a vortex. So what happens when you confine a vortex that normally looks like this or normally looks like this into a 360-degree dimension? Well, now you get it fun. It's a bubble inside of a bubble inside of a bubble. Energy zone, null zone, energy zone, null zone. If you cut it in half, it'll look like that you're putting in there a sine wave. That's 2D version. Again, we're in 360 degrees. Completely different understanding. Physics understands space-time, which is basically their XY axis. They try to put a Z in there. Yeah, but that's just the toilet water. They do not use it. Why? Because as soon as you add a vector dimension to the XYZ axis, now you have to add 4 more points. Think about it. XYZ axis builds out, you have to have 4 more boxes. 1, 2, 3, 4. As a matter of fact, there's 8, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now you have 8 boxes. You create an X in each one of those. You now had to add 4 more vector directions to it before you even get close to what is a geometric form. Those things were meant to be put on a graph. They're not meant to define what geometry defines. Volume of a sphere is what you need. Wow. We get some real trash in the comment sections, man. So funny. I find it hilarious, guys, by the way, and I'm just going to break from what I'm telling you right now just to say this. There's a lot of people who can read. There's a lot of people who can understand things. Same people sit in a chair and they think they understand things. You think that you can visualize everything that's going on. Sit your butt in my chair. I build this stuff. I build it every day. Now let's see it for what it is. Not for what you want it to be, not what your math says, for what it is. Something that you can repeat in a lab continuously and do it over and over and over again. That's where these people don't make a damn bit of sense. Because as soon as you do this, you understand you have just changed everything. Light is an effect. It's exciting gas. Tesla told you the same thing. Tesla told you the same thing. Exciting gas at a distance is what he did. But think about what he's doing. It has every color light spectrum in it. We've seen that. We've seen that already built. It has to do with the one you want to amplify. Which gas do you want to amplify? That will tell you which light color you're in. That's all it is. We see it. We see it in the layers of our Earth. We're going to create different lights based on the layer that's in our Earth, the different gaseous state. Yeah, there's a troll in there. He's about getting ready to get rid of out of my whole thing. You got to see it that way. When Sean built this thing out, you got to understand the implications of what he just did. He created an anode and a cathode. He allowed hydrogen which is basically H2O, which he put inside the negative, which is the magnetic field, which is the magneto part of it. He put it through a one-way diode, which was his clay pot. And that hydrogen itself, once all the water was gone, it turned into a gaseous state. The gaseous state got into the hydrogen state. The hydrogen itself went into the high voltage electricity, and it created a state where you took 360 degrees of a magnetodielectric effect and confined it. It built out a sphere. Once you looked at the sphere right behind it, you had the photo effect that goes on that actually looked like the mirrored image of it. So then you would see the actual rings of it in 2D right behind it. But you knew what you were creating was 360 degrees. The reason it worked is because it's confined in geometric pattern. It's a sphere. We can see it in light reflected as 2D. But the actual physical part is 3 dimensions. What happened to what his project did next is the exciting part. It basically looked like it was splitting. It basically looked like it was cell dividing. It took the energy mass, it then separated it out and pulled it apart. It created 2 objects now. That right there was your energy to mass or energy to matter conversion. It simply was created based on what he did. The light itself was excitement of the gas that was going on inside of it. He created something special there. He 100% showed in a lab how you can take energy and create it into matter. That's why the entire thing is so important. And we saw it confined when you looked at the light behind it in each layer. Therefore, you understood the Casimir effect in compression of that. Now we have the understanding correct. We did an energy to matter. Why is it not light? Why am I not saying, oh, it's a light to matter conversion? All light is excited gas. E equals mc squared. Light squared. That's not correct. Energy is equal to the mass of compression squared. The compression of your gas. Okay? Even that needs to be fixed. It is not light squared. What are you going to do? Ride a light bolt somewhere? You're going to get on your laser and go fly around the galaxy? It makes no sense. Think about it. It makes no sense. You're creating light. Light is only created out of compression of gas. That's it. You create the gas. You see, this is the misunderstanding in physics. Everybody wants to say it's light squared. Well, think about it. Go build your items and then tell me how it worked. And say, well, it doesn't work. Well, I know it doesn't work because I build the stuff. I know exactly how it works. Light squared is the wrong answer. Sorry, it is. If you want to create energy to mass, mass is equal to the compression of the gas inside the magnetodielectric effect. It's the Casimir effect. It's not wrong. Put it out in little pieces and put each part of it together. It's what it is. We've seen it with our own eyes. We absolutely saw it with our own eyes. We saw Sean build this thing out with your own 2 eyes. You saw it. You see that he created the energy. It balled up in compression. He added nothing to it. He added no gas. But in order to get light, you must have gas. Therefore, a gaseous state must occur between the magnetodielectric effect and high voltage, which it does, which will create the gas. The gas itself excites when we get light. We got a big ball of light. And then we saw it split like two amoebas, man. That sucker split. And you saw it go out. What's the missing element? Time. How much time does it take for plasma to build into a solid state? It goes from a gaseous state that we can see the visible light into a solid state, which his project did. It broke off into a smaller mass in a solid state. Think about that. He created an energy to mass conversion. In order to make E equal to mc squared right, you must put that compression in there. You must create the sphere. You must create the Casimir effect. You must create an incompression of it in order to make the matter. Energy to mass conversion is different than the way it's written because you actually have somebody who builds it out. You challenge the known equation by putting something in there that showed it to you. Is the squared right? Yeah, the squared's right because we saw it build out in the field. We see each ring build out inside the nucleus, and then we see each ring build out besides the outside of it. That's your magneto effect. That's your radiant effect that comes out of spinning anything. Anytime you spin a dielectric or high voltage, it'll create a magnetic effect and it'll go out in rings. We can see that. That was pretty evident on the picture behind it. Did it create the squared part? Yeah, there was two parts in there. It went from energy to null to energy. One side holding in the other. What's the null zone? That's the impulse of it. That's all it is. It's the opposite. It's the opposite of what you see. Everything has its opposite or inverse of it. That's all that null zone is. You made compressed space. Yeah, you absolutely did. Yeah, sorry, I'm reading your comment, William. That takes resonance. For those who do not understand nodes, nodes are resonance. How do you make one? Well, you take two frequencies in resonance. That's your primary operating device. That's not a node. You use string theory, which basically tells you that anything that matches the frequency to it from the original resonance frequency will build it out into a node. What does a node build out to? It builds out to a flat plane of existence, and then it has a vortex that goes on top and bottom. That's what a node is. That's how it builds out. And it creates plasma. So there you go. That's what a node does. It has to do with your vortexes. You're building out vortexes. Vortexes build against each other, creates plasma effect. Why? Because it is literally the Casimir effect. You're creating compression. You're creating vortexes going against each other to create compression. That's why a null zone does this. It'll create it everywhere. So what is that telling you about the universe? That there's one main source of energy throughout the entire thing. And all we're doing is building nodes in order to build out everything. Depending on how that node is built, okay, because they can change. And science does a very good job of showing you this on how each one will build out. Then you can start to understand how you get a sun versus a planet. We're building nodes. That's what we're doing. And in those nodes, you basically get a resonance inside. In the resonance inside, it does create the Casimir effect, which will create plasma. It's all seen in the lab. We can do this every single time. We could take our Tesla coil and create nodes and other things based on string theory, which basically just means that the string doesn't pluck itself. Or excuse me, the string is never plucked. Never. You never touch the string. It starts because you put resonance with it. Resonance starts that string to move. Now, what's the problem with most guitars? You're not accounting for the mass. This is why Tesla built everything out based on the weight of copper, not on the size and dimension of the wire on the wrapping. He built it out in mass because every bit of mass is accountable in the string. So when you get to your guitar, even though if you say it's an F string, you still have to add the mass to it in order to understand the frequency of it. It's a bit of a misunderstanding when people see this stuff. We can create this all day long. This is what physics should be. Energy to mass conversion. We'll go over the whole thing one more time, just so we all understand the effect. I take a battery. I connect it to my ZVS. My ZVS is a zero switching module. It puts a DC pulse inside of a ferrite core. 1, 2, 1, 2. That ferrite core goes over to a magnetic core. The magnetic core is basically windings wrapped around a little bobbin. Then we go from that, when we take plastic and we put it around that. Then we put a layer of copper. Then we put more plastic, another layer of copper. It acts as a one-way diode. It also acts as capacitance. When you do that, you get your high voltage positive. Your high voltage positive is simply just a high voltage. It's potential. On the negative side, you get your magnetic field, which is just a core bobbin wound. Okay, that's your negative. That's your magnetic field. What you've created is your magnetodielectric field in between the two. Now you got two wires here and you have it. When you put them close to each other, they spark over and they create a visible plasma and a gas. They will create O3 out of it. Simple. That's the Casimir effect. The closer you put them in, the further you put them apart. Okay? The more amperage that you put in there, the more white you get in there, the color changes. Okay? So all you got to do to change the color in it is you have to change the gases being produced by attenuating the scale that you put it on. Okay? Here's your scale. Here's the amount of energy. One goes up, one goes down. One goes up, one goes down. In doing that, it works as a simple understanding. As you change the frequency, you change the volts and the amps in the system, or you change the amount of the anode and cathode, or the positive and negative, or the high voltage potential versus the magnetic. All the same thing. Now we go from that, we go to make a laser. Fairly simple. We take two rods, we put them on the table, we make sure we spray them so they do not spark over. The confinement of that will create a laser. Why? Because energy does not work by going back and forth, it always vortexes. Now you see the two rods in there, they're vortexing. They're going to create the light itself because the high voltage creates the gas. The gas itself excites. Now you see light in a laser. It's the difference in your magnetodielectric effect in a laser. If you have a weak laser, that means if you change any parameter of your magnetodielectric effect by adding body capacitance to it, you change the directionality of it. Double slit experiment, that's why it fails. Now, we want to take that understanding of a laser and we want to confine it even further because the laser has an open end. Now we want to go into dimensionality, which means we're going to have to create a sphere. In order to put it in a sphere form, you must understand that you've created the Casimir effect between two plates. Now you're going to create the same effect in 360 degrees, not in rings. We're not in two dimensions, we're in three. Now all you have to do is the same exact thing. You have to have a point of emission at the center. That's going to be your positive. You have to have a negative on the outside, which again, Sean's experiment shows very clearly. Now you're starting to spin your electricity. Why? Because it builds out in a vortex. It always builds out in a vortex. What are you doing when it actually ignites and goes into each other? Well, now it's creating the sphere on top of a sphere on top of a sphere. You're now building out your spheres. Once you do that, you've confined the high voltage. You built a magnetic field out of it because any high voltage that spins creates a magnetic field. Now you have a magnetodielectric effect in it. You do no longer need the negative of the high voltage itself. That's why it builds upon itself. Now it's a confined 360 degrees plasma sphere, which is using the Casimir effect to make compression, which gas is being excited in order to emit the light out of it. Now you have high voltage, gas, and light compressed, making plasma. Now the plasma, depending on the amount of time, will now birth out another simple physical form of plasma. That's it. That's exactly how it's done. There's no misunderstanding here. This is exactly how everything works. It's been visually seen from one point all the way through. Everything that I said here can be done in a lab. Matter of fact, 90% of what I showed here is already seen on my channel. We've already done the conversion. We've already created the matter out of the plasma. It's already done. Sean already did it. It was right there. It was the final piece needed. I could show you high voltage all day, how it works in the Casimir effect. The one I don't show on my channel is a laser because I choose not to use lasers because I burned my eyes several times. So I don't like them. But it absolutely is right there. Every little part. Energy to matter conversion is easy. You must put it in its correct understanding and geometry. Once you do this, now the whole thing works out. You cannot use space-time to do this. Space-time is an equation for how your crapper works. It is not how you build things out. Geometry is a must. I don't care if you use algebra for the rest of it. This certain part, you're going to insert geometry right here. As a matter of fact, things work out a lot better when you start to understand things in geometrical patterns. Why? Because everything in Earth, everything everywhere is built that way. Look at the Earth itself. Should have gave you a big freaking clue. It's a sphere. It's not a flat dimensional plane. Even when you get out to the space, they call it a flat plane. Where's the flat plane? Where? Where is your flat plane? There is no flat plane in space. Hello? It's not there. You go into space, it's 360 degrees around you. It's everywhere. There is no flat spot. All you're doing by saying that is changing from a geometry equation to an algebra equation so it works out in your math. Those of you who know math already know this. You're plotting a graph. That's all you're doing. That's all you're doing is plotting a graph. Oh, man. Yeah, they're not the same. They try to say they're the same. They're not. Space-time is a poor representation of geometry. It's horrible. Horrible. They should have never created it. Should never create it. They needed it for the math to work out because everything has to be equal to each other in algebra. That's the way algebra works. X is always equal to something. We don't need X to be equal to something. Okay? Geometry builds things out in an exponential fashion. It's the open loop in the system. See, algebra works great for a closed loop because then you can define the parameters of that loop. In an open system, it no longer works. You must use geometry to define an open system because it builds out. It's not literally geometry. Okay. I sat in classrooms long enough to understand what geometry is and what algebra is. You know why it's not? And I'll tell you why. Here's the imperfection in your equation. And I'm sorry, but Eric Weinstein showed it, and he showed it multiple times. I don't think people paid attention to it because they're so used to doing it. When you have to take your fraction and you have to flip it upside down in order to cross the fraction out, in order to get rid of stuff, then you failed. You should have used geometry. You used algebra. That's why you require that correction. How many corrections? In his theory alone, man, I've already counted over 20 corrections where he's done it. Why? Because the math isn't working out. The math isn't working out because you're using the wrong kind. Instead of realizing the fact that you're using the wrong kind, you continue to do it. And you continue to take that fraction and flip it upside down in order to get your equal values. You're looking at the system wrong. You're trying to make a closed system while you're building an open system. It's a failure. Once you fix that, you got it right. I won't disagree with how the math is done. I won't disagree with some of the things that are said. I will disagree, however, when you start to put it together and you start to do it and you say, well, this math does not work. Why? Because you're only equaling things out. How do you know the math doesn't work? Because you're trying to equal things out. X is always equal to something in the way that they're doing it now. That's how you know the answer's wrong. You're doing the wrong math. Sorry. Oh, man. You can create a star or sun if you have enough energy. We don't. Well, don't let me. I won't lie to you. We don't have enough energy to do it. We can create it in a small form. We do not have enough energy. Just don't have it. Water's a little bit different, man. It's a different medium. Water structures out in order to create arteries in it to make things flow. It confines things inside of it. It's when you add some electricity to it, it changes how water works. But then again, if you do the impulse to it, it changes how water works as well. It'll open all that stuff up. Water creates channels inside of it. It always has. We have electricity in the earth. It creates channels inside of it. We see it as our flow of water from one point to another, or a current, as they would call it, in the water. That's always there. We see it. It structures out. We don't pay attention to it in that way, but it is absolutely a structure. We just don't see it that way because we see it as water. We're not attributing electricity to it, but the whole world's stuck in a magnetodielectric effect. You realize that, right? We call the core magnetic core. We know that we have high voltage in our atmosphere. We're creating our O3. Therefore, we have a magnetodielectric effect. When you get to the bottom line of how everything's built in the universe is built upon the magnetodielectric effect, just like Steinmetz told you. The hard time we have is being able to tell you where you're at in that effect. Because every time you change the understanding of one side magnetism or one side voltage, and you start changing them, and you change your frequency, it changes what things look like. That's what it does. Things look different, so you define them differently. But in the end, it's only the two. Yeah, water works by structuring itself and creating currents. We see it all the time. Thousands of shapes. Well, you got to remember which one's your effect and which one's your cause. This is why cymatics is so hard for people to understand. It's not what you're seeing is correct. Why? You said, well, I got two different values, Nathan. I got two magnetic fields that I'm bouncing off each other and create the magnet in order to create my diaphragm to move in my speaker. What's the problem with that? You only have one diaphragm. You're not in resonance with one diaphragm. It requires two diaphragms. Dollard said it himself, if you want the effect of this, you're going to have two speakers and sit in the middle of it. When they started doing like MK Ultra and all that other garbage they did with the government, they put the headphones on and gave you two, one in each ear, at different frequencies in order to get it. How do we see it? We see it in the levitation experiment, the sound. Once you put the two speakers one on top of the other, now you start to get your magnetodielectric effect. You start to get the right understanding. You now would get the right shape in the sand. Right now, you're only getting a frequency shape. You're not getting resonance shapes. Requires two speakers to get it right. A lot of people don't understand that. They still think frequency is resonance, and it's not. They think the string's gonna. You start playing it, and all of a sudden, man, you're gonna get something to turn on, and you won't. Resonance is the key to string theory. That's always been that way. It will always be that way. And you might as well not have string theory if you don't have resonance. It would be completely useless. Bubble cymatics. Well, I don't know where you've seen bubble cymatics. I'd like to see it. I just haven't seen it. I'm not saying anything bad against it. I just haven't seen it. Oh man. Yeah, it sounds shaped because the world builds out in geometry. That's why. It's all geometric pattern. They still you gotta understand too. Why does string theory work? Because you need more dimensions. Why? You're hurtling through space. We are in our solar system hurtling through space. We have a center point, okay, of our galaxy. We have tendrils that come out from that. You can see that. Simple, right? We're inside one of those little tendril things, which it's like that. But nothing is stagnant. Nothing is like a picture. We're not looking at a 2D still image. That thing is moving in rotation. As it moves, our whole solar system moves. Now think about the vector direction that creates. You're in a confined bubble in your solar system. Now you're moving that bubble within your universe, which is building out in a vortex. Now understand that you must add more dimensionality to it to define that. You have the original defining of your dimensionality inside your solar system. Now, outside your solar system, you must define the directionality of everything else. What happens when you go from the galaxy to the cosmos? You must add another set of vector directions. You're coming up with a theory for everything, not a theory for your solar system, a theory for everything. Therefore, every vector direction matters. You have to add them all. Well, then string theory would be wrong in that instance, wouldn't it? But they do have all the dimensions correct. And their theory of the string works if you create resonance in the beginning of it. It's the closest thing, but not exactly the thing because of these simple understandings. String theories, they always talk about plucking strings. You never have to pluck a string in string theory if you do it right. You create resonance. Resonance creates the strings. You have to have vector dimensionality in everything you do. Otherwise, you're just defining a solar system and it's all worthless crap. If you just define your solar system and what your equations are, it's worthless crap. Let me just tell you that right now. Completely worthless crap. If all you're doing is defining your solar system, you might as well call it the theory of the solar system. Because it's not the theory of everything. Everything builds out into the entire cosmos. Everything is inside of a giant sphere, in case you haven't understood that yet. The entire cosmos is. Oh, man, one day we'll get it. One day we'll get it. Everything's close. It's not perfect because they have no idea how things build out. Math doesn't work for this. You have to create physical objects and see it to find the object. This is why you have an apple. You have to define the apple. Did it fall on your head? Great, define it. That's what physics used to be. Now it's just a bunch of math. Some guy in some freaking sweater sitting in front of a fireplace. Total crap. Huh. Yeah, I agree with you. String theory is not perfect, but it's the closest match we can get to everything. Yeah, we don't have to. Hold on. Can we move our entire solar system or the entire galaxy instead of moving a spaceship? You're building things out in energy. Once you realize that and get rid of the understanding of the light, then yes, things start to work out. Why? Because if you create a bubble inside of your solar system, and that bubble is basically a mini solar system, you eliminate inertia. You go as fast as you can propel yourself, but it goes even faster with zero inertia to it. Yeah, you think the speed of light is the fastest you can go. Well, it's not. That's the starting point. Okay? Light speed is the starting point. It's not the finite point. It's a starting point. That's where we get it screwed up. You're trying to define light. Define light as an effect. It's not a cause, not a fundamental law. It is a simple effect. You excite gas, you get light. Get every color of the rainbow. And it builds out exactly in the lab that way. And once you sit there and look at and you could pill any one you want. Go look at a high voltage spark and look at what it is. See it build out just from a DC flyback, and you'll start to see what it is. Immediately you have gas, you have ozone, and immediately you have plasma. You have light that comes off of it. All of those are created from electricity. You just changed the way you did the electricity. That's it. It's all the same thing. Which one's the cause? Which one's the effect? Well, the electricity was the cause. The Casimir effect was the cause. You created the effect from both of those. That was pretty simple. You created the gas and you created the plasma. Created light. Light wasn't there before. You created it. That's how it works. Simple process in a lab. Builds it right out. Anyway. How my project's going, that's something I'm just going to keep to myself right now on that particular one. There's some cool stuff that goes on in it, but it's not ready yet. Anyway, with that said, guys, hopefully you understood what I was trying to tell you into the conversion of it. Energy can absolutely be created into mass without a problem. You just have to use the right understanding of understanding it. And then you have it. With that said, have yourselves a great morning.